Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the JT Jorfi podcast. My guest this week is Anna Winkler, and she is the owner of Shakti Yoga Studio in Maplewood, New Jersey. Anna, thanks for being here.
Thanks for inviting me. Happy to be here with you.
Yeah, thanks for coming on. So, wanted to start off, maybe just kind of rewind all the way back to when you first got introduced to yoga. What started you off on this path? Maybe what kind of sparked that initial interest?
The very first thing was I was growing up in Southeast Iowa, and the Maharishi International University opened in Fairfield, Iowa, 20 minutes from where I was growing up. And my mother got involved with that organization a little bit, and then she brought someone to give us mantra initiation. So I got a mantra initiation. I was probably 12, 13. Hated it. Absolutely no interest in meditation or anything like that. So I said, I'll never meditate. I swear, of course. So, and then the next big episode was in college. So I started in San Diego, and then I transferred to Hawaii, and I finished in Hawaii, which was an amazing thing to do.
Yeah.
Coming from Iowa, especially, I wanted to go to the beach. So I met my mentor, who was a professor of psychology, transpersonal psychology. Um, and transpersonal psychology is beyond the personal. So it's like looking into philosophy and spiritual life and so on, and interpersonal relationships and everything like that. So he would have us read Carlos Castaneda. He brought a Buddhist monk in to teach us meditation. We taught meditation through his freshman seminar program. And yeah, and then I started getting interested in that sort of spiritual aspect. Never was interested in religion as a kid, but this sort of sparked my interest. So then I got a book called Acu Yoga, and I was practicing out of that book in Hawaii, which was a combination of acupressure and yoga poses. And then I was doing aerobics in Hawaii. And when I moved to LA after I graduated, I was looking for exercise. And I used to love to just put on music and dance and stretch and move and do my own thing. And so I tried jogging in LA, hated it. I tried tap dance, which was fun, but not really my thing. But I saw this billboard of my soon to be guru on Sunset Boulevard doing a deep lunge, reaching back and holding his foot. And I said, that's what I want to do. So I looked in the yellow pages for yoga. There was no internet back then. It was 1988. And there were two yoga schools in LA, Kundalini and Shivananda. And so I went to the Kundalini place first, just to see what that was all about, and took a class and got my first yoga book, which was Patanjali's Yoga Sutras. And it was called How to Know God. So it was a Vedantic look at the Yoga Sutras. So that was not my place. But the second place I went was the one with my guru, Swami Vishnu Devananda, was the Shivananda Yoga Center. So I went there and I said, I'm not going to get brainwashed. I'm not going to chant Hare Krishna, because, those Bhagavad Gita guys were out at that time. So I, of course, got totally brainwashed, chanting everything under the sun. But it was good brainwashing. It was all very, very good.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that was my home. So this was yoga and Vedanta, the Shivananda Yoga and Vedanta centers. So Vedanta being the philosophy, yoga and Vedanta are both the two of the six main philosophies of India, but Vedanta is a slightly different philosophy than the Yoga Sutras. So that would be our background philosophy, and then the practice would be the yoga, all the different yoga practices. Swami Shivananda's practice was integral. So the integral yoga studios, Swami Satchidananda, same time they came over from India to New York City, they both had the same teacher, Swami Shivananda. So that was their teacher. So his approach was to practice all the paths of yoga, and then you kind of focus on one path. So he kind of brought back the practice of asanas, actually, because it wasn't really practiced so much in India. It was more worship, pujas, maybe a little meditation, but the asanas were practiced by the sadhus in the caves, and it was considered not so, people wouldn't do that because the sadhus weren't considered, sort of good people. They were like the dropouts of society and so on. So Swami Shivananda actually brought that back with his teachers in his ashrams. And he was also one of the first to allow women to practice yoga in his ashram. And he had women swamis as well. So he made a lot of swamis, a lot of renunciates. Yeah. So that was a big push at that time of yoga coming to the West. And then people coming, had been going to India like in the 60s. They came over in the 50s, I think. So
Yeah. It's interesting how you mentioned that the poses and like the asanas were not really I guess, practice as much in India, but I know from myself, my very first exposure to yoga was through asana, posing practice. And it seems that in America, that's, at least from the surface level, seemingly all that the yoga studios are more the physical poses of yoga. Could you kind of maybe describe, as you see it, like why that's the case? Maybe kind of why more of like the physical, more like exercise or more poses type of practice has risen to the top as the most popular expression of yoga versus a more of like a meditation and
Yeah.
philosophy?
Yeah, well, I mean, like for me, I was looking for exercise when I found yoga, and it is a form of physical exercise, and we're very exercise, forward here. I mean, people like to work out and do practices, and so that's what it looks like on the surface, right? And what happened was like originally there was more of that, like at the Shivananda and Integral studios, you would have satsang where there was meditation, chanting, a talk. There was selfless service. The organization was completely volunteer. I think that's changed a little bit now. So it was different when it first came over, but then people really got into the asana practice. And I think the reason is because it's so, it works on every level and it just works, so people like, they want that, they want to do a practice it works on the physical level, but also the emotional and the spiritual, everybody feels that. So it's like, it's succinct. You can get a lot of stuff in a short amount of time just doing the asana, So that's why I think it got very important and popular. And also there wasn't once it started getting popular, there was more people in the West teaching, not so many more people coming from India. So the philosophy didn't come over, I think, as much, as the practice. Like Buddhism, it's all the philosophy and meditation. So you get a lot more of that opportunity from the Buddhist perspective of philosophy and meditation practice, because that's what they had. That's what they brought over. They didn't bring over physical practices so much. So everybody's teaching that, and they sort of take that piece from the Buddhist and then take the asana piece from the yogic, I think, and kind of patch those together sometimes.
Yeah, yeah, that is interesting. And you kind of mentioned that like earlier on, more on like a spiritual practice and not being religious. Could you talk about maybe the distinction there, like kind of the differences as you see that, and like how your yoga practice allows for more of like a spiritual exploration without necessarily maybe adhering to like a religious dogma or something like that?
Well, yeah, I mean, so that's actually kind of what we did, right? Well, first of all, I grew up, my parents were kind of hippies, so we weren't like a super religious family in any way, but, we were baptized and all of that stuff. I went to church so I could get candy on the bus, until I won the big Hershey chocolate bar, and then I'm done with church. I never went back.
Nice.
But yeah, so I never liked the church, it was not my cup of tea, like at all. And neither was the meditation when I was young. Like, I tried those things. It was like not for me. But it was the asana, which was the way in for me,
Hmm.
because I think, I'm very physical, I do massage also. And I think that's my way in. And I think that's why it's a good way in for most of us here in America. It was a way in for us. Explore who we are through the body, as a first prop, like
Hmm.
use the body and you'll see there's more to you than what you think, right? That you experience more when you practice, like all this held trauma we have, right, in our bodies. And we experience the release of trauma. Many people will cry in a yoga class, like their first yoga class or something,
Hmm.
because they have an experience of a trauma release. And then how is this connected to my body? And at first we didn't have all that science backed information, but people were having these experiences and felt like a spiritual experience to practice yoga. And then it had all these other aspects and the meditation and the breathing and the service and the kirtan and all that. But I never felt like I was a Hindu, you know, even though yoga comes from India and India's, primarily Hindu, and it comes from that aspect of their religious background, but we didn't bring that over so much. There's a little bit of that, the gods and goddesses in within some of the practices, but the fact that you can do this. I remember when we first started practicing, when Swamiji, my guru, the Catholic Church was really against the yoga practice. They said it was the cult of the body. He took out a full page ad in the New York Times saying, refuting that that's not the case. Is to understand who we are, to work through all the different complexities of who we think we are, to find the truth of who we are. right? And we start with the most gross, which is the physical body. So it's a way to look into spirituality without clinging on to, most of us are not going to say, because I'm practicing yoga, I'm a Hindu. We don't do
Mhm.
that, right? But we do have a spiritual experience. We have an experience of something beyond the physical, working with the physical. And we go, what is that? I want to learn more about this.
Yeah. Yeah, it does seem, I know just my own personal experience. Once I was able to almost get my body to the point of like exhaustion or like just being tired out or having, like released the energy through movement, then my mind was able to settle down and like be more calm. I think that was kind of maybe one of the reasons why asana is used before like a meditation session is so that you kind of get the jitters out and enable yourself to be still. But I do think that as like a first path and first step into that practice, the physical practice for me and the asanas were super helpful to just remove some of that maybe tension that was present there to then allow myself to connect into my body more. So I think for my own daily life, like I was never really connected to my body. I was very much living
Right.
in my mind space, and
Yep.
kind of the body was just this thing that I know I needed to feed and get some sleep, but otherwise didn't really try to take care of too intentionally. But then the practice of doing something physical or like the same asana poses every day then allows you to see what affects changes in diet or how many hours of sleep you got the night before. Like because of
Hmm.
that consistency, you're able to see the results, which I think was really interesting, and then opens up a whole other kind of gateway to all these different other practices that yoga includes. So maybe we can kind of use that as like another jumping off point. There's things within, like you're saying, the mantras was your first experience with it, didn't
Hmm.
necessarily enjoy it as a child, but could you talk through some of these other modalities, like mudras with your hands and
Hmm.
breathing techniques and
Yeah.
like vocalizations? Could you
Hmm.
maybe describe some of the other expressions that kind of fall within the yogic tradition?
Yeah, sure. I mean, just one thing that's also very different than the physical practices that we have done more in the West is it's ideally it's not a competitive practice. It's not a team sport, right? I mean, even though you're doing it in a group, the practice is for you to go inside yourself, right? And it happens automatically. I remember my husband's friend came for yoga and, he'd never done anything like that before. And he's like, what he discovered was that the emotional benefits far outweighed the physical benefits for him in the practice. And it was just something that wasn't something that was on his mind, that's what was going to happen. And I think we're just under so much stress, our nervous systems are so amped up, and yoga it slows you down, right? Even though it might be fast paced, it's not like as slow as Tai Chi, but it's a different way of approaching sort of a physical practice. And then you go more subtle because, you're holding a pose for a while. You start to maybe feel your breath, something you never thought about before, right? So the breath is a little bit more subtle. And then a mudra is a shape you can put your hands in or your whole body in to a shape. And then you breathe into that shape. You're moving the energy. And when you do the practices, you're going to have an experience, I think, of energy that you don't have when you're doing other types of exercise. And not exactly sure why that is, but it certainly felt that way for me. Like I had an experience of energy in a way that I'd never had that experience before, you know, not in
Yeah.
any other physical practice. And then the chanting, so in Buddhist philosophy, it's called body, speech, and mind, and the speech is associated with the prana, which is the subtle aspect in Sanskrit prana of the breath, right? So that's the energy part. So those two are connected, the speech and the prana,
Hmm.
right? So when we vocalize, we're exhaling. So people who sing in choirs and everything, it's a joyful practice, right? There's joy in it. And that vibration that we create when we chant is very soothing, right? So humming is very soothing. Gentle rocking is very soothing. These kinds of things are soothing for the nervous system. The nervous system can relax and healing can occur. And all kinds of different healing things can occur with a yoga practice also. And, of course, there have been studies done that people have their own, and basically the body heals itself. You just have to give it the space to,
Hmm.
nobody's healing your body, right? You can give it little things to support, whether it's practices, whether it's medicine, whether it's, different things you do in self-discipline, but it heals itself when it's given, the right container. to
Yeah,
do
yeah, and
that.
then notice on your front door, and I guess part of the title of your yoga studio is the healing arts, like yoga studio and healing arts studio as well. Do you find that maybe how many or percentage wise of your clients or your students coming in through the door are kind of looking for a healing modality, above and beyond just like a physical exercise? Is that something that you've seen trend like one way or the other over time, where people are kind of coming to this practice for more of a healing experience?
I think well, especially my studio, because, it is a combination of yoga and healing arts, right? And it always has been from the beginning. But there are studios that just focus on sort of gym yoga. It's like a
Mm.
combination of yoga aerobics, or now yoga and weights, or yoga whatever. So yoga has become kind of commoditized, like it's a commodity in the health and fitness and wellness, world. But it is definitely a healing art, and it's like it works on so many levels of healing that it's just sort of intuitively, this is good, this is what I need, this is good. So my studio, I think, does bring that kind of people. I think now I've been 20 years on Springfield Avenue, 24, been doing it in the studio here, and before that I was, teaching other places. So I've gotten older. My students have gotten older, you know. So we're not like in it to have six pack abs or strong arm muscles. Although it's nice, it's fine. But we're in it because you feel good. You do yoga and you feel good. You have energy for life. You feel happy. It brings happiness. I mean, when it comes down to it, we want to be happy, don't we? We all want to be happy. And my guru, Swami, who I have a new teacher now who's Buddhist, but Swami Vishnu's, one of his mottos was, health is wealth, peace of mind is happiness. Yoga shows the way. And that's so true. I mean, right? If you don't have your health, it's hard to feel good, right? And if you don't have your needs met and, have a community around you, it's hard to be happy. So I think these basic things are what people need and want. And especially nowadays, the world is in a bit of a madness, it's kind of spiraling out of control. And I think the simple things are the best. I'm sure you're finding that now that you're married and going to have the baby.
Right.
That simple things don't seem so simple though, right? But they're so powerful. Like, it's so much more important than the fancy car or the job or whatever you're doing. All that is to support the most important thing, which is this family you're creating, don't you think?
Right. It definitely reprioritizes the things that I once considered to be the most important pursuits versus the ones that kind of reveal themselves as being the most important. Obviously, family and just connection and quality time spent with loved ones, like
Yeah.
drastically changed in my list of priorities to the very top. Whereas I think before I was kind of caught up in the career slash success, whatever that definition may be, as a young man saying like, okay, the amount of money that I make is the measure of my self-worth, rather than, like the constitution of my character and like my day-to-day happiness and experience, which I think now is in kind of just brightly highlighted that like that's actually what I'm striving for. Like, how can I have my day-to-day be as, fulfilling as it possibly can, while making the world a better place for yes, my future my future child that's
Yeah.
coming into this world is
Yeah.
something very much on my mind.
Part of it, I suppose, is generational also. Like the generation before us had to work really hard, and that was it. Work was it, and also you had to for survival. I mean, that it wasn't like an option. It was like something you had to do. So then you wanted to be good at it and all of that. And that was really great. And they went a little out of hand. And then this next generation is like, yeah, work is important, but I want to enjoy my life. I want to enjoy my time with family and friends and things that I want to pursue my own interests. That's important. And I guess it's a sign of the level that we're at of comfort. We have most of our needs met, so we
Hmm.
can afford to do that. But at what cost? Right now, everything is like imploding in on itself because we're overusing everything, all the resources. So I don't know. It's a very confusing and complicated time. It really is. But I do feel like, if you talk to any person one to one, the most important thing is really, health, happiness, family, friends, connection, community. That's what's important.
Yeah. Yeah, it's kind of interesting you're mentioning that, yeah, like this generation didn't necessarily need to work as hard because there is so much kind of abundance, and the things that are the previous generations have enabled for us just
Mhm.
through their hard work kind of brought to mind almost like a Maslow's hierarchy of needs pyramid, but like at a whole
Yep.
species or like societal level, it's like, yeah, that base level foundation of, food, water, and shelter has kind of been provided for. So it allows this generation to kind of step up that ladder up onto the next level of the pyramid. And maybe we're getting closer to like that self actualization, like staying in that. But I think that without philosophies, whether they be religious or spiritual, like things that yoga lays out, then it can be kind of easy to get lost in the sauce of the self
Totally.
actualization pursuit and like what is actually a
Yeah.
good idea.
Yeah. Humans do so many things, and most of it is terrible. So many terrible ideas have been implemented, and horrible things have happened. But we do a lot of amazing things too. I mean, human beings actually are an amazing creature. It is true, but also horrifying. Can be horrifying. But yeah, I hope we're moving into a good space and that we can sustain it, because it's also built on the suppression of people who don't have as much. Those people are beginning to become aware of that because of the internet and everything. You can see what's happening all around the world now, and so there's a lot of confusion and fear, and so it's a confusing time.
Yeah.
But I think we need to hold on to supporting one another and growth, and like you say, let's self-actualize together. Let's make it sustainable. How can we do that?
Yeah. Have there been any like particularly maybe memorable or salient points from your studies throughout the years on the yogic path that you kind of keep in your back pocket, or just kind of nice frameworks with to live by as you approach your daily life and different things you face?
Yeah, I mean, always my most important thing is for me, it's like be present. Like be present, like with what is right now, right? Because everything is impermanent, everything is constantly changing. So holding on to something, it's a loser's game, because it's going to change. So letting go of whatever it is we're holding on to about how it's supposed to be or whatever, and just being present in the moment and doing the next best thing. Like make the next best choice of how to behave, of what to do, of what not to do, that kind of thing. And keep your mind really open to the magic, because if you think you have it all figured out, you put yourself in a box. For
Mm,
sure. And because I mean, that's how we see the world, through our perception of, our past experiences, what we've taken in, and so on. And then we're not seeing reality. We're seeing a reflection of it based on our memories and our thoughts and perceptions and all of that. I took this course with the Nalanda Institute, compassion based resilience training, and then have taught it a few times. And one of the scientific things that they've discovered, and there's so many things we've discovered, and then we say this is what it means, and then maybe it doesn't mean that. But they're saying, like, within 1 minute of experience, we're taking in about 1 to 2 seconds of new information. And the rest is like memories and perceptions and emotions and the way we view. So the mind works more like it's projecting out on the world reality,
right.
right? And it's taking in some information, it's creating a story and projecting that out on the world. So it's a big mystery, how it all works. And if we can just keep our heart open to the mystery, right? And ideally have faith in this great mystery, like there's some purpose, there's some meaning, and I want to know what it is, and I want to open my heart and my mind to the experience and learn and grow, and you know become bigger than my the way I think it should be, the perceptions I have, the way I see the world, because that's always a box.
Yeah, yeah. The
Yeah.
kind of concept of like non-attachment. I think the way that it made sense to me was like, okay, if I come to this situation with my preconceived notions as to how I want it to go, most likely it's not going to go that way because
Yeah.
I'm not a future seer. I can't predict like exactly what's going to happen. So then I might end up becoming disappointed, or maybe I planned for one thing and prepared for something else, and then it went the opposite way, and now I'm like stuck, in a bad position with that. And so I think kind of you're saying, become present, be open to the magic of the situation, rather than trying to like desperately hold on to, oh, the end result needs to be this, and if it's not, then I'm not going to be happy. It's just kind of like setting yourself up for failure if you cling too tightly to how you want an experience to to unfold.
100%. I just want to point out, I don't have that down. I'm working on it. Okay. I'm in progress here. That's my goal. My goal is to be open, but
Right.
that, it has to be refreshed daily. That's why we do the practices, to refresh, 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 right?
Yeah. Yeah, that is another thing that I think when I first started out on whatever I would define as like a spiritual journey or quest, I thought like, oh, there's just these things I need to learn, and then I learn them, and then I'm good, and like life will be easy from then on out.
Yeah.
But the framework of more like this is an endless journey, it can go across your entire life and lifetimes and millions of years if you believe in the reincarnation path and things like that. And I think when I first encountered that, it was very daunting. Like, oh wow, it never ends. Like that's scary. Wow, this
Mhm.
this is so intense. But then kind of over time, as that different way of looking at the universe was in the back of my mind, the more it became reassuring. It's like, oh, okay, like I have an eternity to try to perfect myself, to try to improve, to learn these lessons, and to become a better person over time. And there's not this pressure to need to get it done before I'm 50 years
Next
old, and
week.
then yeah,
Yeah. Yeah. My current teacher says that. My Buddhist teacher says that. There's no deadline.
yeah,
Don't worry, there's no deadline. It's like ongoing. And it's not, linear. It's completely spiral, it's just, so we're all going in and out of, like clarity, lack of clarity, AirPods falling out, there's no perfection.
you just got to roll with it. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah, what
Yeah.
have you noticed? You've obviously studied a bunch of different types of philosophies, maybe primarily like in the Eastern tradition, but have you seen kind of more universal themes coming through, kind of similar threads that cut across
Yeah.
things like the Buddhism and Hindu and yogic philosophies? Maybe you could touch a little bit on those.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the sutras they're both coming from these sutric practices, and they're very, very similar. And the philosophies are very similar. Like the emptiness quality, which is shunyata in Buddhism, in yogic philosophy, it's purna. Purna is fullness. So you can either see it as completely empty or completely full, right? It's pregnant with possibility. So that's like Prakriti. Purusha and Prakriti are the first in both yoga and Ayurveda. There's this philosophy. Gosh, the name is escaping me right now, but it's how things manifest, right? And the first thing is unmanifest, and then one becomes two, and they call that from the spark of voluptuousness. One becomes two. So there's Shiva and there's Shakti. There's spirit and there's matter. And then that matter is unmanifest, primordial, unmanifest matter, Prakriti. So those two together, it's kind of like a yin and a yang, mother and father, ha and ta. And that is, that's that place of possibility where everything comes out of and then it manifests into reality. So that's the similar philosophy. Samkhya, that's the name, Samkhya philosophy. I don't think they have that spelled out so much in Buddhism, but there's a lot of similarities, and we're trying to figure out like, oh, is it all one, and all of that. So I like the way my teacher says, okay, so it's not one, like reality is not one being, it's not two, and it's not many. So
So it's
what
zero.
is it? I have no idea. I wish I knew. It's beyond our ability to conceptualize.
Yeah. Yeah, when you're mentioning like the spirit and matter, and I'm not a quantum physicist, although I do love listening to quantum physicists describe kind of where the science is going on this. And I don't know if you've kind of heard similar ways that they describe the universe as like there's this observation quality within consciousness, and that's what causes this quantum level of probability to kind of like collapse and become physical matter. Like that's the
From
only,
observation,
seemingly
the
the only
witness.
thing.
Yeah, it's that witness, right? The thing that and then that it becomes form, right?
Mm.
Then it becomes right, and so when you're not observing it, it has no form, and when you observe it, it has form. Right, exactly. So it's kind of hard to conceive of that in a way, right?
Right. Yeah. It's like,
Yeah.
I mean, and seemingly these philosophies have been around since early when human ability to think, once we evolved to a certain point, like these traditions and religions have been around for so long. But then now, like science seemingly is kind of like coming full circle and meeting back up with it to try to explain the universe and like how it came into being. And it's just, yeah, it's just interesting for me to take these kind of what I thought were two very disparate, very separate practices of like science versus spirituality, but like actually
Hmm.
they're describing the universe in very similar ways is kind of reassuring, I guess. It's
It
like, okay,
totally
there's
is.
probably
It
some
totally
truth
is.
there. Yeah.
Yeah, like I don't know if you heard the Dalai Lama said, if science and Buddhism disagree, then we have to go with science. You know, We have to go with science. Now you don't because we're able to like see things, but we don't always know what they mean. It's
Uh,
like all these diagnostic tools. We've diagnosed this and that, and then we're going to prescribe this and that. In the medicine world, but we don't always know that A and B equals C or whatever. That part we don't really know. It's more complicated than that. So we can observe it, we can kind of see something, but what does it really mean? That part's a little more complicated, you know.
yeah,
But yeah, I mean, it's a big mystery, and I think if we open our heart to the mystery and but we get so attached. The most thing we're attached to is our ideas, right, about how things are. I've got
hmm,
it figured out, right?
right. Yeah, I think that's a big quality of science, which is a good thing too. Is it's also this never-ending journey of self-discovery and universal discovery, and it's constantly trying to prove itself wrong and figure out what theories are no longer matching up with the observations in
Yeah.
reality, much like the individual journey.
But at the same time, those many of those scientists don't they even though even like in the medical world, they've proven this theory wrong, they still keep going with that theory,
Mm,
right? Because that's the whole system is based on that theory. And it's the same
right,
with us as individuals. We base our whole life on some theory we have, right? We don't even realize we've had it, and then we start to realize we're wrong, and we don't want to let go of that theory because we've based everything on that theory. We're afraid everything's going to fall apart. I think we're kind of
right,
at that kind of a place right now with our whole sort of global consciousness.
right.
That's why things are breaking down a little bit, because I think we're pushing through maybe a little bit to another level of consciousness or something. I don't
Hmm.
know, but
Yeah,
I'm sort of very in touch with that in a way that's sometimes hard to find words for. But something's going on. I think we all know
right.
something is going on, but we don't know what it is.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I think with the internet, like you were mentioning, it enables just so much more information to be shared and accessed by anybody with a smart device. So you have just like billions of people connected, and I think just the sheer magnitude of like the human species on the planet and like what impacts that has had on resources and things like that, and then just kind of realizing that a lot of these systems that we still live under or with or within the structure of were designed a long time ago and
Yep,
they're
they're
probably due for
breaking
an
down.
upgrade. Yeah.
Totally. Yeah, but it's
But it's
it's
like
massive. It's kind of massive and overwhelming.
and
Yeah,
it's like it's like what's the plan to safely move everybody. So say it's like the food supply, like we figured out a way to grow and raise so many livestock and so many farm crops and things like that, but it's like, okay, well, what's a more sustainable system, and then how do we get our way to there without kind of going hungry and starving in the interim when we transition.
exactly.
And so many people's paychecks day to day rely on
Yeah,
the
it's
old
it.
system.
It kind of reminds me of this woman who was a Vedic astrologer, and I was having a conversation with her. We were driving up to somewhere together, and she was telling me she worked on a reservation and with a bunch of people, and there was a lot of problem with. I guess they were talking about like who's had like incest, like sexual incest, and every hand in the whole room went up, you know, and it was like it's this overwhelming problem at all levels of society of that group of people. And it's not just that group of people. We know that the whole world has problems with all kinds of problems like this. But it was like you can't just destroy you if you go after every single person, you destroy the whole culture and the society.
Hmm.
You know what I mean? So
Hmm.
it's just really it's not so easy sometimes to figure out how to make these changes when we recognized this is wrong and it's massive and we're all doing it. So many people are doing it. How do we change it? Because people freak out, because we don't want to look at our shadow and go, we're part of the problem. How are we going to fix it? You know what I mean?
Right. Yeah.
So, yeah.
If only there was a yoga practice for an entire country, or yeah, like a way to
And
get a
it goes
political
beyond our
system.
country, and so the whole world is in chaos. You know what I mean? And so there's so many problems in so many countries. Going through similar shifts or shifts at their own level of consciousness. You know, so God only knows, or
Yeah.
goddess.
Have any of these traditions or like scriptures or kind of interpretations, have they contemplated these types of shifts happening at like broader humanity levels, and like are
Yeah,
any like kind of ideas or maybe recommendations that came out of it.
Well, I know like in the Kundalini yoga philosophy that we're entering the age of Aquarius, right? The Aquarian age. And so there's an awakening. People say that we're moving into the heart chakra. We've been in the Manipura chakra. We've been in the power over others phase, which is
Uh-huh.
always unhealthy, right?
Mm.
So it's not power over others. It's willpower, power of self, right? Without overpowering others. So that's like that interconnectedness of understanding how we're all interconnected, you know,
Uh-huh.
so that the moving into that heart chakra level. On the other hand, there's a not so positive look of the Hindu philosophy and so on, where there's these four ages, right? And we're in the fourth age. And that fourth age lasts for I don't know how many hundreds of thousands of years. And we're not that far into it. And it means Dharma is standing on just one leg. Dharma is like righteousness or doing the right thing, right? So it's kind of like everything is breaking down. And then everything, according to this philosophy, becomes unmanifest at the end of that age, goes back into the belly button of Brahma, the creator. So that's like that black hole, right? Where the dark matter, everything gets sucked in there. And then again, the Big Bang happens and the universe begins again and all that. It's a cyclical thing.
So maybe it really is the end of days.
Right. So, I mean, you can go either way. I kind of prefer to go with the heart chakra opening, but at the same time, looking around, you wonder about that. So,
Yeah.
so I don't
So
know.
any tips in your day to day to kind of get through
Get
that or
through
like
it.
make situation?
Yeah. Well, yeah. So what they do say about this age is that it's the best time to do spiritual practice because it's so much more powerful. And for me, I mean, that's for me like the crux of my life. Right. It's not like I do, like a huge practice. I do my morning routine and it changes all the time. Not all the time, but it changes over time here and there. I'm doing more asana, more meditation, more breathing, whatever it is. But trying to bring that so that you use that container, whatever that is, practice is, to create your own heart and mind at peace, as much as you can. Don't watch the news. You can look at the headlines now and then, and so you know what's going on. But if we get over absorbed in that, it's just we're in fight, flight, freeze. It's trauma reaction, which if you're in that fight, flight, freeze trauma reaction, it's never going to be, you can't grow. It's not a growth phase, right? It's a
Mm-hmm.
defend phase. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So in order to grow, we have to get our nervous system out of fight, flight, freeze into rest, digest, ease. And then we can have a chance for growth and to do the right thing and then being present and being mindful and letting go of preconceived notions and just doing the next best thing, in each moment, and then going back to that practice to sustain you, right?
Right. And it seems like that daily practice is kind of that like recalibration, like how to, engage the is it the parasympathetic or sympathetic, the one that calms you down.
Parasympathetic and
Uh,
counterintuitively, yeah. Sympathetic is, yes, you're in danger, run.
And yeah, it does seem that like a lot of the news media and social media and like they call it doom scrolling for a reason. Like there's a lot of doom out there, and if it puts you into that fight, flight, or freeze state of being, then yeah, it makes sense that you wouldn't be able to kind of move past that to try to grow, to try to focus on your own well-being and your own development. So practices like a yoga or breath work or meditation can maybe kind of recalibrate that on a daily or regular basis, at least to not have you constantly living in that kind of stressed
Yeah,
body
and
state.
when you're not in that stress body state, other people who come in contact with you can feel that, right?
Mm-hmm.
That we resonate with other people's nervous systems, and that's our mirror neurons, right? So what happens is we think we're forget it, they're angry, and now they've made us angry, right? Like I caught their anger. Well, what we did was our mirror neurons go, oh, there's danger, right? And I know
Uh-huh.
what this feels like, and that's what it is. So we're experiencing our own past feelings of fear or anger based on what we're seeing and reading in somebody else's face, eyes, movements, everything so quickly we don't even realize we're doing it, right?
Yeah.
So if we keep our nervous system peaceful, other people who come in contact with us will resonate with that and be peaceful. So we're not just affecting ourselves, we're affecting the people around us, everyone we have interaction with. If we look at someone in the eye and say hello, and instead of just treat them like they're not a human. I was joking with my friend at lunch yesterday. She's like, I still can't believe even though I see it all around me, that I'm going to die. Like, not me. I was like, I know. I'm the main character here. These are all extras. You don't kill off the main character. you know, we all think that, right? We all think that, because that's true for us. We are the main character in our own drama. But the more we can let go of our clinging to our own, we overemphasize our importance, right? We're underemphasize all kinds of things. You give something too much importance or not enough, whatever, we're misjudging things all the time. But we definitely do that with ourselves, right? We're so important to ourselves, which is two sides of the coin here. So everything is about us, right? And like, it's all, how it affects us. But so you want to kind of de-emphasize that a little bit, but at the same time, you want to know that you're a part of everything that's going on. You're not separate from it, right? So it is you. The whole thing is you. Identify with the whole thing. Get bigger and bigger with your identification, instead of smaller and smaller and smaller. And that's where those connections with family and society, right, and people and community, then you feel more safe and grounded and, like, I'm meant to be here, I belong here. It's the folks who don't have that have issues, huge issues,
Right. Yeah,
it's
and
not
especially,
easy.
I mean, it's been a little bit of time by now, but like the lockdowns and isolation and all that stuff coming out of the COVID pandemic, I know myself just, not going into an office, not seeing people, not going out socially. It's like, wow, it really impacts your frame of
Mhm.
mind when you don't feel that broader connection. And there are, practices and different ways that you could go out there and find it. But I think on like a broader scale, having so many people be so much more separated from each other than they were before, I feel like a lot of the turmoil and fighting and arguing and politics and all that kind of like stems out of that. Also, was a cry for help of like, hey, like I'm still here. Are you are you still here? Are we still like a
Yeah,
team or
yeah,
whatnot? And
yeah,
hopefully,
yeah.
people can work more toward that. I wanted to actually ask your maybe interpretation on the mirror neurons. I think it makes a lot of sense that like the physical body and just kind of almost like a mirroring in like in a physical sense of like your physical form. But when it comes to maybe like your auric body or ethereal body, do you think that kind of has something to do with it as well? Like maybe even like if you were blindfolded or something and you didn't see an anxious or angry person versus like a calm and happy person, do you think you'd still be able to kind of
Well,
mirror their
I mean, one sense we don't give enough importance to, and I think it's hugely important, is smell.
mm,
Because I think a lot of information we gain through smell that we don't, it's below our radar. And also our sense of smell has gone really bad because of all the toxic fragrance everywhere.
mm,
So that actually, it goes right into the limbic system of your brain. It bypasses the blood brain barrier. It's really bad. And it really stimulates a fear response in people, actually.
interesting.
That's why. So another reason is not just like being out in nature is great, not just for the eyes and everything and for breathing, but smelling.
Hmm.
It's an important, it's animals smell fear. We can smell fear. We can, so there's all kinds of here. All the senses are happening. And certainly, energetically as well. I'm not that, I feel energy, but I don't talk about it in that phraseology so much because I feel like there's so much information that we're getting through our five senses that we don't even understand. You know what I mean? It's so important. So yeah, I mean, it's good to sort of self protect, your energy field and all of that, whether it's actually creating something or it's just in your mind, you're creating something. Because everything basically, if you look at it at a depth of philosophy, is created from our mind.
Right.
So,
Right.
if we feel safe, that's all that matters, right? Because,
Mm.
no, that doesn't necessarily mean we're not going to get hit by a car or anything like that, but at least we feel like we've created a safe place for ourselves. So I mean, I don't know. I mean, I don't see like colors or energy or I've never had any great experiences. I have a few little experiences, but like big spiritual experiences or anything like that. It's just more like I feel like my mind gets pretty expansive, but sometimes it's hard to pin things down of what I'm feeling. But that's the other thing about social animal. We're such a social animal. So people like are confused about emotions and emotions are bad and this and that. Look, we wouldn't have emotions if they weren't good, if they didn't help us to survive and thrive. Emotions help us. That's how we connect to other people or we understand, the vibration of anger. Like, see, I said vibration. So yes, of course, we're feeling it on all levels, right? But yeah, that's so important, connecting with others on an emotional level, and not disregarding that as something, oh, only women have emotions or whatever it is, or they're bad. All emotions are bad and only rationality is good.
Yeah.
That's not true. I mean, you're already feeling it, I'm sure, with this new baby on the way, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Totally.
It's like the most important thing.
Yeah. But no, yeah, I
Yeah,
like how
life
you
changing.
phrase that with like the five senses that we have. Like there's so much there that we're maybe not even consciously aware of, and there's so much power of receiving these signals from our outside universe that we maybe aren't even aware of, that even if there is some like more energetic or like ethereal body type of interactions happening, may not even be necessary because our physical bodies are doing so much more than we even can imagine.
Yeah, I
And yeah.
do feel that. Yeah, totally. Yeah. I mean, I remember reading about the skin in this book, Job's Body, which is written by a massage therapist about massage, and it's a lot about anatomy. And I remember I was going to like type this whole thing up on Facebook about the skin. The skin is so important, the skin. Now I can't even remember, what it was, but I know it was pretty amazing, the things the skin does,
Right. Yeah, the largest
So,
organ, it's our barrier between the
yeah,
outside universe, right?
yeah. It's like our
Yeah.
little cellular membrane that makes us appear separate, right?
Mm,
Like each cell has one of those membranes that makes it feel like it's separate from the other cells. That's its
mm,
job, actually.
mm.
One of its jobs. Keep things out, let some things in, whatever.
Yeah.
We're in this big soup of this greater being, of the planet, you know, and then that's a part of the cosmos and whatever. So it goes on and on.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I'm sure we could both go on and on for hours talking
Yes.
about this. So I did I did want to be cognizant of time, and
Yes,
thank
of
you
course.
for taking the
Yeah.
time to join. Was there any kind of final thoughts you wanted to leave the audience with, or you can kind of plug any upcoming events or things happening at the studio that people can check out?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, well, go to our website, shaktinj.com. We always have a lot of different things going on. I am involved with my Buddhist Teachers Retreat Center in upstate New York. I'm on the board of directors there. We have a retreat every spring and fall. Well, Madeline and I just did a Reiki retreat, which was great. Not Reiki, I'm sorry, chakra retreat. She does Reiki. And we have spring detox coming up end of April, and then we have one in the fall also. And there's lots of stuff going on up there. It's a beautiful center, Dharmakaya Center. And then at Shakti, we have stuff going on all the time. And just a parting thing that I would like to say is that let us do the best we can to make peace with our being embodied and being embodied on this planet with other beings, animals, humans, and so on. And let us strive to make it better and not, for everyone, you know, all the beings.
Yeah. Yeah,
Yeah.
beautiful words to leave it with. Anna, thank you so much for coming on the show. I'd love to have you back sometime. We can dive even in deeper into these metaphysical topics. Would love that. Thanks so much.